States, born in New York, and grew up kind of all over. And then I think I've been pretty fortunate. I've had a lot of jobs where I've been able to work and live internationally. So I've lived in Asia a couple of times. This is my second stint in Europe. And so just been able to see different parts of the world. And really got me hooked on travel, actually, just through work.
And how do you decide, what kind of background to leave BHere and go further?
So after BHere, which is they're a company not everybody necessarily knows the name, but they make most of the railway cars that we'll see in different metros around across Europe and across the world. They also make some of the most some of the popular jets and private jets around the world. So pretty interesting to work in the private jet space, and then had an opportunity to work in healthcare. And we had a chance, similar to the way like Visa and MasterCard connect almost every store and every bank around the world. We got to build that to connect doctors and pharmacies across the United States. And so just an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Yes, so then you also did, you went to Microsoft afterwards, and you were working on health services, right?
Yeah, so from that pharmacy business, I really got hooked into healthcare and the impact that you can have through technology and genuinely making people's lives better. So Microsoft at the time had a healthcare division, and I joined there as the chief architect.
And why did you leave Microsoft?
So the healthcare group that we were in, we spun it out into a joint venture with GE Healthcare. So they were really good at the sales part. Microsoft was very good at the technology part. And so we spun that out, and then I chose to move on to Skype. It was right around the time of the Microsoft Skype transaction.
When did you come to Skype?
So that would be 2012.
Because Skype was on stage, I think back in June. He was first employee of Skype, right? Did you work with him as well?
I didn't, but I think one of the things that's fascinating about Skype is, probably many of us have heard of the expression the PayPal mafia that kind of started in the early 90s and sort of proliferated across almost every company in Silicon Valley. I think people talk less about the Skype mafia, but basically almost every major European technology company has some heritage and some link back to Skype. It's really helped build an ecosystem across really the whole continent. It's pretty amazing.
That's interesting. Yes. You might know Niklas Enstrom, the founder of Skype, who is now running Autonomy, which is one of the biggest venture capital companies in Europe. They exist now for over 10 years. Who was also speaking on stage last year in June. Now, moving on to you changing from Skype to Amazon. How did that happen?
So a friend of mine who I partnered with at Microsoft, who was my product peer, had moved over to Amazon and had been running some different things and had just taken over product management for S3, which I don't know how many of you guys know Amazon Web Services, but it's effectively the hard drive for the internet. And so it actually went down a couple of months ago and takes down a big portion of the internet with it. And I got a phone call to come talk to them and have the opportunity to run engineering and be her partner again. And so she and I work really, really well together. And the opportunity to work on really a foundational part of the global internet was, I think, one just too big to pass up.
Let's spend some time and discuss the culture of Amazon. How is it different from companies like Microsoft?
Very different. I think one of the things that Amazon gets a lot of press for its culture, for good and bad. But I think one of the things they probably don't get enough credit for. I think they have one of the strongest operating disciplines of any company that's out there. And if you just look at the breadth and expansion of businesses that they've been able to go into and be successful in all these different verticals, it's a testament to the way that they operate their businesses and the way they focus on them. There are also some cultural aspects that they do that are very, very polarizing. And they try to be really deliberate in filtering for these up front in the interview, but I think anybody who's been at Amazon will tell you there are people who love it and people who can't wait to get out of there, but you get very little in the middle. And I think it actually speaks to the strength of their culture. I think any company that has a great culture, you should be very deliberate and specific about what you stand for and what's important in your organization and what makes people successful. And it should be polarizing. It should be so clear that people can self-select if they love it or they don't want to be there anymore. So I see a lot of that reputation in that press is more about them having a strong culture and people being able to easily identify if they should stay or not.
Yeah. Are there any things that you would like to implement to Skyscanner from what you learned at Amazon?
Loads. I mean, Amazon runs one of the largest pieces of software and computing in the world. It runs most other modern internet companies. And so I think anytime you have a chance to see the internals of something like that and learn from it, there's no shortage of techniques and things that you can take from there and learn and apply. Skyscanner certainly is a fast-growing business, and we continue to grow and continue to scale. but it's not the fabric of the internet.
Yeah.
So I think there's quite a lot to learn and quite a lot of lessons that.
Are there lessons you set out in your mind?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think as much as it's an engineering problem in an engineering company, the lessons that have really stuck with me are less about what code to write and more about how to run really, really big pieces of software. And so what is the rigor and discipline you need around understanding what type of metrics you need, what's the level of sophistication you need, what is the type of culture you need to build in engineering. So how do you have a session where everybody gets to talk about the mistakes they've made and when systems have gone down and when issues have happened, but do that in a way where people are not afraid to share their mistakes and instead share it as a, hey, hands up, we made this mistake, here's what we learned, here's what it took to fix it, here's how we're going to prevent it from happening, and here are the things that other people could apply to make sure this same mistake doesn't happen to other people's systems. And I think there's a lot of nuance in creating that safe environment, creating that culture where that can happen openly. That is actually more important than some of the code, because all of this is just lessons learned and brute force in a lot of ways, just to make sure that you can apply those lessons and help the product continue to scale and continue to improve.
True. Now for you, the audience, we're talking about sharing now with Bryan. You can also share, and what you can do is, you see the screen behind me. If you have any questions at any point during the talk, you can jump in. You have to jump out, you jump in, and the way you do it, you just pull out your phone, open the browser, no need to download anything, you just open the browser, and type in slido.com. That's it. And as a hashtag, you see the hashtag is SGEurope. And you're in, and you just ask away. Any questions you'd like to know, feel free to ask. You have the options of voting for questions you like. And I promise you the top 5 or maybe 10, depending on how much time you have left, we will be asking. So don't be afraid, just ask away, and we'll be taking some questions during the course of the interview and also towards the end. The same applies also for live stream. We have some people watching us live stream, so feel free to go to slido.com, SGEurope, and ask away. Now, Bryan, when you were approached with the opportunity to join Skyscanner, what made you say yes?
So I think it was a long discussion, and as I got to know Skyscanner better, every time I learned something new, I was kind of just astounded that this business existed the way that it did. So it's a company that actually over its history raised very little of investor capital that was deployed back into the business. It had been consistently profitable for a number of years, and so coming from the States and knowing quite a lot of the Silicon Valley startups, it seemed antithetical to the way a lot of the well-known startups we know have grown, which is they tend to burn VC money in the short run to drive growth and then over time become profitable. And this was a company that had operated with discipline from within its first couple of years to be operational, profitable, and still be able to drive growth.
Yeah.
And then it turned out it was technology-led and product-led. So of the original 3 co-founders, the original software engineer is also the only CEO in the history of the business, and still the CEO today. And so when you have a software engineer as a CEO, it definitely creates a very product-minded company. It was a company that really focused on figuring out how to build the best product for users that users will love and come back, rather than constantly trying to buy users and spend money on marketing and AdWords and Facebook and things like this. And so a company that's very product-centric and technology-led, really focused on users first. We have a very simple prioritization framework internally, which is travelers first, partners second, and Skyscanner third. And we use it pretty religiously in terms of how we make trade-offs and make difficult decisions. And the more I learn, plus my own personal passion around travel that has developed over a lot of these long multinational jobs, it seemed like too much of a good thing at the same place for me to not join.
Mm-hmm. How many of you have not used Skyscanner before? Maybe 5 then, okay.
I can help install the app later.
So I've been a user of Skyscanner maybe since 2004 or so. What was really frustrating to me is that Skyscanner.com was not available at the time. We discussed it. Now we already have the domain. Let's discuss some numbers for the audience to just understand the scale of what you're working with.
Sure. So so one of the things with travel is it's a different frequency than say Facebook or Instagram or things like this. But we still look at the same metrics. So one of our key metrics is active users per month, and those are users who are actually doing something in the product. And we see 65 million active users right now and growing around the world. A month, every month, yeah. And then if you imagine the seasonality of travel, we can probably all think about the number of times per year we plan a trip, 1, 2, 3 times, and you extend that out over a year, and it's hundreds of millions of people that are actively using the product and gaining value from it. And we appreciate all of them, and for all those who do use the product.
Thank you. Run those on Amazon?
We do. So historically, we've had some private data centers. We still have some of our services in private data centers, but more and more of our workload is in Amazon, and eventually will be 100% in Amazon.
Is it because of a big discount from Amazon?
So working internally, I know that they're not very generous with their discounts, and so we get.
I'll show you cool constraints.
We work really closely with them.
Yeah. Okay, so you have 600 million people a month. What are the numbers? Should we understand?
Yeah, I think the other one. Often travel sites are not necessarily the thing that you connect with globally and tell your friend in Hong Kong about this amazing travel search site. You almost kind of just by default assume it won't work there. And for the longest time, we've worked really, really hard to make a product work and feel local, feel viable in all these markets around the world. So we do have users in virtually every country on the planet. One of the numbers that we do look at is the number of countries where we have more than 1 million users a year actively using our product, and right now it's about 49 countries and continuing to grow. And these are countries across everything from Australia up to South Korea, across most of Asia, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, of course. We've been quite fortunate in the way our business has grown thus far, and continue to work to serve users in every single one of those markets.
And what I did not know, I only learned it because I was very close to you, is that you have loads of partners which you're working with on the B2B side.
Yes, so there's a number of different partners in addition to going to Skyscanner.com, where you're on their site, so something like Lonely Planet or something like MSN Travel. You'll go to these sites and they'll incorporate in a flight search or other search results where it's really powered by Skyscanner. When we work with Bing, we work with Yahoo Japan. Most search engines that are not Google, not all, but most of the global ones do work with us. And we're able to power the results. We offer an API, so we work with everybody from young startups with one person with an idea and spare time up through global companies like a Microsoft or a Yahoo Japan.
That's interesting. How do you make those APIs connect to something like Bing or Yahoo?
I think one of the benefits of being a technology-centric company is that we hold ourselves to similar standards that those guys operate their services to as well. And so other than plugging in an API and being deliberate about what that API looks like and making sure that the signatures don't change, you can't introduce breaking changes, it has to have the same level of availability and response time, the same ways you would run any global service. And then we're able to plug it into their engines pretty straightforward.
Okay, now when you joined the company, what did you expect and what did you really find into the technology?
Well, so when I joined, I tend to ask a lot of questions. It's kind of my style. I warn my teams all the time if I'm going to get together with them. I just ask a lot of questions. So I asked quite a lot going in, and I think what I hadn't appreciated is the rate of growth and expansion of the business. And so when you look at numbers, the company historically has grown 40% year over year for a number of years or more. And when you look at that, it looks like a number. You go, okay, I don't know, it keeps growing. When you really have to live that and understand what does that mean to have number of users, to have number of markets, to have number of partners, all these things doubling every 18 months, to have people coming on all around the world, to have new countries launching every month, and really get into the thick of that and understand what that really means. How does it challenge how you have to change your processes? The process that you used to have to manage 10 countries doesn't work when you have 20. It certainly doesn't work when you have 40, and really doesn't work when you have 60. And so I think just that pace of change and keeping up with that speed of consumers around the world was definitely something, even though I thought I was ready for, I definitely had to adjust.
And when you joined the team, you did you keep most of the people there, or you changed it? How did the culture change after you came?
Yeah, so I think when I joined, the team at the size it was, we certainly grown the team. But there was no explicit, let's go get rid of people or do this or do that. I mean, it's a group of individuals who built a massively successful, thriving company. So it's not like it was small when I joined. I joined about 2 years ago. What I've really been able to do is help work with the team and help continue to grow and continue to scale. And I think taking the benefit of a lot of my personal background of working at Amazon and Skype and Microsoft, of being able to help them get to that next point of scale, but where we've gotten to now and where we continue to grow into. And so I think it's been complementary rather than replacement.
Okay, now as a CTO, I've seen you talk about some important topics. One of them is leadership. What is your take on how somebody like you can be a good example to other people, and how do you see leadership at a company like Skyscanner?
Yeah, so just to give context on this, because I think some of these guiding principles really change as the size of your team changes. So our technology organization today is 600, maybe 650 people. That's across product management and design and data science and software engineering and infrastructure and so on and so forth. But at that level, you're far beyond the level where you could talk to everybody on a regular basis. We have our team spread across 3 different continents, across 11 different offices. Even getting one all hands where everybody can join. There's a window of about 45 minutes a day where people from Miami can get up really early but still dial in with their coffee, and people in China and Japan can join a call right before they go home or go to the bar. And so, dealing with all these teams and all these different continents and locations is challenging. And so you really have to be emotionally ready to let go of that level of control. And the only way that you let go of that control is to drastically increase trust. And so a lot of the times I spend with, both internally and externally when I talk about leadership is, what are the things that you as a leader need to work on and develop and work with your team on to increase that level of trust and autonomy where it becomes something that you're not worried about. So one of the thought exercises that I always suggest to people is, if you think about the last time you had a team and they did something and they went left, and as soon as you heard about it, you're like, oh my God, you guys should have gone right. How did you not know to go right? And that's like this very instinctual reaction. But if you really pause and question yourself, you go, well, how come you knew to go right and the team went left? And you'll realize I was in the board meeting and we had this discussion and I had this context and had this answer, but I couldn't share it with them because it's confidential or it's this or that. And you realize that the team didn't have the information to make the right choice. And I think this is often the thing that we're really challenged with as leaders is we naturally tend to have more context. A big part of our jobs is collecting information, worrying about the breadth of the business, looking out where it needs to go to. And I think to really challenge yourself and help develop that autonomy and that trust in your team is really as much about knowing yourself and coaching your team on how to communicate with you and how to give you the information you need to feel comfortable, but also for yourself to really let go and trust that your team is smart, capable, and rational. And smart, capable, and rational people, if you give them the right information, will make the right decisions.
And how do you distinguish those when you have an interview? Are there any shortcuts? Are there any aspects of personality which you look out for or you like to avoid?
Yeah, I don't think there are any shortcuts to interviewing in general. I think doing interviewing well is really, really hard. Probably all of us have been as candidates and have probably gone through interviews where sometimes you go, wow, that was a really good interview. Even if you got grilled and totally screwed it up, at least you felt like somebody really interviewed you well. And other times you get interviewed by somebody and they have no idea what they're doing. Sometimes we're on the other side of the table and we have no idea what we're doing. But I think interviewing well is a skill, just like doing marketing or doing AdWords spending or doing SEO or writing software or doing machine learning. Interviewing is a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice to build and to master. I think hiring well is actually a strategic asset for a company. If as a company you actually know how to interview well, how to hire well, how to get the candidates that best are going to be successful at your organization, which does not mean the best candidates, it means the ones who are capable of doing the job but also best positioned to be successful in your environment. And being able to do that well just takes time. Now for me personally, in terms of finding those kind of really special individuals, I really look for the difference in people when I ask them a question. If they're going to give me a very transactional answer, like, oh, what color is that wall? The wall is blue. Okay, that's interesting. Versus those who will take that and really expand on to put on, what's the context in the business? Why should that matter? What are the alternates? What are the next couple steps that I may take this further? What are other competitors that might have done something similar or different and either succeeded or failed miserably? and help build confidence that you're going to take a business problem and own it and solve it for the business. So it's not just the task at hand. The task at hand might be the first step, but really solve it end to end. And so when you talk to candidates, and it's almost at any level, you can see people who really thrive on that ownership, who really want to solve true problems end to end. And those are the really special candidates that you hope to join your team and hope to keep them engaged to stay on the team.
So those skills, what is the culture at Skyscanner, and how do you hire for that?
So just to put it in context, when we interview, say something like a software engineer, where engineering is a highly technical and complex skill. About half of the interview stages that we go through, we have a pretty regimented process, but half are focused just on that question: will they be successful in this environment? So culture fit, as most people would call it. The things that we focus on is a couple things. One, I mentioned before, autonomy and trust. The way that we work and the way we operate, autonomy and trust is paramount. If you're somebody who will only do things because you're told to do them, and you only do exactly what you're told, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you won't be successful in our environment. I think a big part is just knowing what makes us unique and successful. The second thing is we have this expression that influence is independent of hierarchy, and so we run a pretty flat organization. The CEO sits at a desk in an open plan in the middle of some row in Edinburgh. Right? There's nothing special. We have no employee anywhere in the company has an office. Everything's pretty flat. People ping each other directly on Slack. I encourage people to ping me directly. They do all the time. We tend to run a pretty open and accessible and flat organization. But if you're somebody who's comfortable going to the person who owns a problem to get something resolved or to give them feedback, you'll be successful in our environment. If you're somebody who really prefers to just work directly with their line manager and ask their line manager to go up to their line manager and so on and so forth, there are plenty of organizations where that behavior is appropriate and successful. It's just not ours. So much of that interviewing is knowing what's special and unique about your company and what makes people successful there, versus saying anything is a good or bad attribute.
Yeah. Steve Jobs was famous for saying that he doesn't hire A players and the best people he can to tell them what to do, because he wants the people to tell him what to do. How do you see that?
100% agree. So it's never a great proxy, but I think there is a career stage where the direction of a task assignment really flips. So as a rough proxy, let's just say it's kind of at the director level. A lot of the people that I talk to, director is one of those kind of ceiling promotions where sometimes people are at the senior manager job and they're trying to figure out how to get from senior manager to director. And I think a big piece of that is that autonomy. Right? One thing that I'm hoping for is I'm hoping to find people to tell me, here's this problem, I've solved 95% of it, to solve the last 5%, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. I love that person. Didn't have to think about it, told me what to do, has clearly thought through the problem, I know how to go do the 3 things they just asked me to do. And they make it a low cognitive task, and they can help solve that problem, get that roadblock out of their way, let them go on and continue to solve business problems and move on to the next one. And so I think there really is that flip. The irony is that most of us going up through our careers are usually pretty intimidated. And so we're always afraid, oh my God, I'm going to go to the exec, I'm going to tell them what to do, and they're going to be pissed off at me, they're going to be upset. And there was this VP at Microsoft that made this expression to me, which is, everybody's so scared to tell me the truth, and all I do is look for people who will actually tell me the truth. And I didn't really get it at the time. He said, I don't know, I tell you the truth, I tell you what I think. And I think getting into some of these more senior level positions, you start to really appreciate the people who will just tell you actually what's going on and tell you what's on their mind. And do it in a private forum. Don't call them out and tell the emperor they're naked in front of 100 of their team. But finding people who will actually tell you what's going on in a way that, as a leader, you can just never get that type of context are invaluable and really, really important for somebody to stay connected to what's going on and solve the real problems that are happening in the team.
Now, when you yes, this is true, what you're saying, but when you're working at a skill you're working at, sometimes it's justified basically not having people change the process too much, don't you?
Well, I think it's less about optimizing for low amounts of change or high amounts of change. I think it's about talking about change that's justified and makes sense. Now, one of the things with change is, again, going back to company culture, some companies are great at changing. They can change things every week, every month, every quarter. And they're very nimble, and that's how they've been designed, and that's how the people that are there really thrive on that. In which case, change is cheap. And so if you know a better way to do things, you might just do it tomorrow because change is cheap. You have other organizations that are like turning an aircraft carrier. And if you want to turn it even a couple of degrees, it might take 18 months. And if it's going to take 18 months, you think really, really long and hard about driving that change because you're like, holy shit, is this like the thing I'm going to go do for 18 months? I don't know if this one's worth it. And you hold on to it until you realize something that's worth it. So I think as much about change is, again, comes back to culture. If you have those organizations that can absorb it and are always looking for the way to do something better tomorrow than you did it today, the friction on change is pretty low, and people are always willing to try something new.
Change is cheap. I like that. It's true.
At the best companies, it absolutely is.
But it's uncomfortable.
I think change is always uncomfortable because you go into the state where today I know how to do the thing I'm doing, and I'm going to go to something tomorrow where I don't quite know how to do it. But it comes back to what people believe in and what they pursue. And so when you have people who love to learn and love to challenge themselves, love to grow, love to master a new skill, and love to evolve, and you're surrounded with those types of people, a change is just an adventure to learn something new, and it's something people get excited about and more motivated about. And so much of this, I apologize if I sound like a broken record, but so much of this comes back to the people that you hire. And so when you asked about recruiting before, and I say this really a strategic asset for a company, being thoughtful and deliberate about the people that are on your team, the people of what do you recognize, what do you reward, what do you look for, who are the people that you want to be carrying that torch. So many of these things, so many of these challenges come down to what people believe in, what they can do together.
True. Talking about change, Skyscanner changed last year. You guys have been acquired by a big Chinese company, the Chinese largest online travel company, Ctrip, which in itself is a big company. You mentioned they're doing about 30 billion a year.
Yeah, market cap is about 30 billion.
Market cap, so it's a 30 billion market cap. They acquired Skyscanner for $1.7 billion last year. How did the company change? But more importantly, how did what you do change? Because the scale should probably be a bit bigger now.
Yeah, so I think for context, I've been fortunate enough to be part of a number of acquisitions, mostly on the purchasing side, between Microsoft and Skype and some other companies. And I think normally when acquisitions happen, the way most of them seem to play out is you get this like honeymoon period for about 6 months, and then they go consolidate like the back office. So legal is now one team, finance is a team, and they just start consolidating things, and eventually you consolidate the product over, say, 18 months, 24 months, 30 months, things like this. And I think that's the normal, the classic synergies is the kind of management consultant term. It's the nice way to say fire some people. And I think when you look at the benefits that we've had of this particular transaction, we have a company that is massive and dominated digital and online travel within China. I mean, they built depending on the stock price, $25 to $30 billion market cap business, primarily on serving travelers inside of mainland China, and then their travels all around the world. And I think similar to a number of Western companies that have tried to go into China and have really struggled and have not necessarily found a foothold or gained traction, I think the same is in reverse. Right? Being successful in mainland China requires such a different skill set, such a different mindset, such a different product. It's really hard to scale that internationally. And I think one of the things that's been really great working with the Ctrip team is that they recognize that, and rather than trying to go solve this on their own, their motivation to do the Skyscanner transaction has really been to gain that international exposure and experience. I shared some of the stats before. We pride ourselves on being successful and good at going global and serving users all around the world, and that's been very complementary to them. And so actually the kind of post-transaction has been really very much hands-off, and we're run as an independent entity. You asked about my job. The people at my board meetings are a little bit different. They're now employees of Ctrip, but the level of engagement is primarily at a board level, and then it's on us to see where can we work with them to get better scale or to get learning. They built this massive company. They've done all kinds of things in travel. Where can we learn from them and gain their insights and gain their knowledge to make smarter and better decisions?
So how do those meetings look like? So you have those local Skyscanner meetings, and then how do those meetings with Ctrip look like?
Yeah, to be honest, I think they look like a normal board meeting. I don't know how many people have had the privilege of going to board meetings. I don't know how many of them are normal. But you kind of go through a couple, like, run the business stuff. So let's go through the finance numbers, go through the update on product, go through the update on technology, go through legal issues, go through commercial issues. It is very much kind of an operations report of the business, and then you usually tackle 1 or 2 or 3 very specific strategic topics. And they're engaging in robust conversations, and they're always focused on kind of the multi-year journey of the company. And so the participants are different. Prior to the transaction, we were backed by Sequoia Capital and Scottish Equity Partners, and we had representatives from their organization. We had some independent directors, and now the primary attendees are from Ctrip.
So that means mostly in your technology area, because it's a big company, and it's probably 20 times bigger than what you have scale-wise. Now, are you implementing some learnings from them, or you are better than that company, or how do you share knowledge on the technical side?
Yeah, so I think the learnings have gone both ways. There's some areas in data science and in AI, and specifically computer vision, where I think they're more advanced than us, and we're trying to learn from them. Given their historical target user base has been primarily in China, they have not done as much work of running their service globally, running it in data centers all around the world. And what does that mean to actually run both inside of China and outside of China? Just because there's different providers, and the AWS environments don't quite talk to each other, and there's some interesting firewall issues, and so those are challenges we've conquered that we can turn around and share back to them.
Okay. Now, talking about the present and the future a little bit, what is the biggest trend right now?
I think the challenges for Skyscanner one is on the technology front, which is purely keeping up with that scale. It's easy to say that the percentage number stays the same, but when you apply the same percentage to an ever-increasing bigger number, the absolute gains are pretty substantial. And building a system that keeps up with that scale and continues to anticipate future growth and stays online and stays available for our users all around the world is a challenge unto itself. I think there are a number of other challenges that just happen within the travel vertical globally. So people are traveling more. The regulatory environment is always changing. You have lots of new interesting entrants into the market. You have some interesting international relation issues. So I think always lots of things to keep us on our toes, and mostly we just focus on figuring out how to build the best consumer product for travelers we can.
Okay, and in terms of your future changes of the company, let's discuss some buzzwords which are running all around the world, buzzwords like AI and neural networks and self-learning technologies. How many of those are you applying, and how many do you personally see as the potential next quantum leap for the company?
So internally, I think there's probably not a technology out there that we don't currently use in that space. So if you look at kind of machine learning as this really broad spectrum of things, from some relatively simple statistical modeling items all the way up into the deep learning space, I think there's lots of different reasons and different ways that we apply that. I think the one that we're looking at that's potentially most transformative for us is I guess really maybe in 2 areas. So one, we've done a lot of things publicly with voice. And so we were the first travel app to launch on Alexa. We've done work with Cortana. We've done a lot of chatbot work with Facebook and with Skype and Telegram. We've done quite a lot to explore some of these more natural user interfaces and chat-based user interfaces to understand what users really want and continue to experiment and evolve with that platform. So I think that's one place where you want to provide less input and get more value out. And the only way to really bridge that gap is through machine learning and artificial intelligence. So that's one area where we're actively working. I think the other that's really potentially transformative, not just for us, but really for anybody in the travel sector, is the advances that are happening in computer vision and computer imaging. And so if you think about just the ways that we think about travel and how do you dream up your next holiday and your next vacation, normally it's that you see a picture that somebody else posted on Instagram or on Facebook, or you see a picture in a magazine, or you're on a plane for a business trip and you're flipping through and you see some really relaxing beach and really wish you were there instead of, let's say in London in the middle of January or something like this, right? Like we see these images, and these are the things that conjure up these memories and these emotions and these feelings and this dreaming of where we want to go. And computer vision is advancing at a rate that's just completely unprecedented. And not only that, the way research works years has gone from the biggest companies in the world spend billions of dollars to invent this stuff and don't share it, to now everybody open sources things almost on the same day that they make the announcement. A couple months ago, Microsoft made the announcement that they reached human parity in speech understanding. And what was great to me is in the blog post, it says, by the way, the code we did to prove that we could match human parity for speech understanding, here's our GitHub link, and you can go look at the code yourself. And like, you have world-class research for free. So I think the way images will really almost replace text and replace the keyboard is pretty fascinating for travel in general.
So you think it's going to be also influencing what you do in your product?
Yeah, I think we would be naive to ignore it. What is the exact right pattern, I think, is a lot more difficult to predict. If you look at how voice and speech has evolved, just as an observation, voice to text is highly used in some of the Asian countries and not very much used in Western countries. And I think until you really get into the hands of millions and hundreds of millions of consumers, these are things that become hard to predict from a lab or from an experimentation standpoint. So that's why we always like to test these things and put them out to users and see what do they get, what feedback do they give us, and how do they respond, and what things do they like, and what can we improve.
How do you get the company ready for that? Because there's Alexa, which is quite impressive in terms of how much sales are doing. How much do you expect the average people, the average users, to stop using websites and typing it in to, as you're saying, people just literally speaking?
Yeah, I think predicting the future is a way to make a lot of mistakes. And so rather than how much will people look at that, I look at it more of, will people expect that and demand that? And I think one of the things that we look at from a Skyscanner perspective is not so much that might be the only way that somebody books a trip, but that might be part of it, right? So imagine if it's just a voice thing saying, hey, I saw this picture on the magazine on the BA flight. Remember that Ibiza looks really awesome, and so does Mykonos. Okay, great. Maybe it's just that voice and kind of adds it to your bucket list, and then you can go back onto your phone later and go back into the app and actually search at it and look for pictures and type things in and pick dates. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be binary through only that interface, but rather it's part of the compendium of the experience.
True. This is very true, but as we saw, the change from web to mobile happened really quickly. And some companies are really taking back by that. Some companies like Facebook, they did right that. Now the question is voice going to be the next big one, or is it going to be just an addition to what people are doing?
Yeah, I think this is the fascinating thing with technology, is that change happens really, really slow until it happens really fast. So if you look at smartphones, right, the original smartphone is like the one that was running an actual operating system and had apps, which was Microsoft Windows CE something or other, and originally released by Orange here in the UK, I think 2001, 2, 3, something like this. Maybe even late 90s.
Yeah.
Like, it was years ahead of the iPhone, but it was very, very low traction, didn't necessarily have the right approach or the right model. And then what happens is adoption is very slow until somebody hits on the right pattern to leverage available technology plus something they invent plus the right consumer experience, and then all of a sudden that's where that hockey stick shows up. And so I think, again, it's naive to not continue to experiment with this. I don't know that anybody has yet identified the pattern that drastically shifts behaviors away from a screen to audio only yet.
True. I was actually very interested when we launched the Windows CE in a while. It was very slow and pretty cool. I don't think it was the adoption, it was more like somebody else figured it out how to do it. It was Microsoft just couldn't go with the right UI, and until iPhone came on the block. When you look at competition, what have you learned from your competition so far?
So I'm going to go back to Amazon, because Amazon has this expression which is, we're aware of our competitors, but we obsess about our customers. And I very openly plagiarize that, because I think it just kind of speaks to both sort of my personal belief system and also the way we operate our company. And so if I'm looking to competitors for things to copy or things to implement, I think that's kind of a path to failure. Saying, okay, I'm going to get really good at copying someone else. And instead what we really do is focus on understanding our users, understanding how they're using our products, and really obsess about that. We talk to users frequently. We have user groups all over the world for different cultures, for different languages, for people that use the product in different ways. and we're constantly trying to understand where the pains are, where the challenges are, and what we can learn from them.
Okay, so that's the competition. Who do you consider your biggest competition right now?
So for what we do, there's a couple global companies. The biggest one is probably Kayak. They're very, very large in the U.S. They own a couple other brands globally. There's another one in Europe named Momondo that actually Kayak is just in the process of acquiring now. That's probably the biggest at scale, and then there's a number of companies that do something similar in different countries. You have companies in India, in the Middle East, and so on and so forth.
Are you afraid of something like route travel or not at all?
Well, again, I think it would be naive to think that the company that controls 90-something% of the searches around the world and to inject a search widget to help people find flights, certainly threatening. So again, we're definitely aware of it, but even since their introduction to that, it hasn't hurt our growth. Our company has continued to scale and continue to grow, and I think it comes back to really focusing on figuring out how do we deliver the best product that users love and that they continue to come back for. One of the stats that we look at is we actually use Google Trends as just a way to identify how much people value us. So we look at what terms people actually type in. So if you pick up the Google Trends graph for the word Skyscanner and just compare it to something like Booking.com as a search term or even Expedia as a search term, you'll see a pretty consistent growth curve. And we think that's just representative of giving people value when they use the service, and then they'll come back the next time they're ready to plan their next trip.
It's interesting. So because me personally, for example, London, because there is this option of London and I can choose any airport, which is very useful, as opposed to going to Stansted or Gatwick or Heathrow. Not many other search engines are using it.
So Google bought another flight search company a handful of years ago. So I suspect they're probably not on our API customer list. But I think most of their competitors and most of the markets are usually folks that we're talking with and already working with or in the process of working with.
Okay, now talking about the competition, you mentioned that the language you have from them. Is there any competition in terms of hiring? Because you're growing fast and you have lots of offices. How much portrait in how you guys hire as opposed to the competition?
Absolutely. I mean, I think people who are talented and work in the technology sector, the technology space, I think we're actually all pretty privileged to work in this domain at this time. It's basically a 100% employee choice market. Most of us are fortunate enough to, when we decide to change roles or change careers, we end up with multiple options. And so I think the burden is really on the employer to help somebody understand why this is the right place for them to join. And so we frequently see when we're talking to candidates, they might also be looking at offers from all the big household names, so either a Google or a Facebook or a Microsoft or the other hot startups, a Deliveroo, a TransferWise, and there's always competition. And it's really about helping candidates find the place where they're going to be best and the place where they're going to be able to grow and develop the most. And sometimes that's not with us. We hope that it is, but it's got to be a bi-directional thing. And so we try to be really open and direct and transparent about that. I would say virtually any candidate that we're talking to where we go to extend an offer, they almost always have competing offers or alternate offers from elsewhere. I think that's just the reality of the demand for talent that we have in this world today.
Okay. Now, before we go to the audience and ask some questions from the screen as well as from me personally, what I'd like to know is, in terms of the future, you are always here, and the company is already sold, so you kind of very autonomous. What is the next big thing which you want to achieve with the company?
Yeah, so I think one of the things about Skyscanner is that the people that are there love the problems that we're working on and love the benefits and the value that we can bring to travelers and to partners. And I know for me personally, one of the things that really stuck with me years and years ago, I was talking with my friends. It was, I don't know, like quiz night or trivia night at the bar. And it's like a Tuesday. And we're just talking about, what'd you guys do this weekend? I said, I went to Bali. And I was living in the States at the time. In Indonesia. Yeah. They're like, so you booked a ticket to Bali. Because I just saw you on Thursday. I said, no. Friday morning I got up and I flew to Bali. And I was in Bali for 2 days and then I flew back. And I was like, why the hell did you go to Bali for 2 days? I go, well, hold on, I got the ticket for like $200. And then the entire conversation changed. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was the idiot who went to Bali for 48 hours, but rather, how did I find that ticket for $200 when it's normally like $1,200? And I realized for me personally, there's so much of the world that can be seen, and the more that you can do to help people do that in an economic way, right? Instead of spending $1,200 on one ticket, I could buy 6 $200 tickets and see 6 different places. And I think just that as a value and as a pursuit is something that has really personally resonated with me. And so when I look at what we're trying to do for Skyscanner, most of the people at the company feel that same way. And it's how do we help bring this gift of travel and being able to see different parts around the world, being able to see your friends and family, being able to see your relatives, whether they're close or far away. I think that's really resonated with us and keeps us focused on what we're doing.
And do you feel like you arrived technology-wise, or like do I find today the best economical tickets, flight ticket on Skyscanner, or if I goes half an hour longer, I can buy a better one?
We do lots and lots of work to make sure that the former is the case. So we definitely believe that you will be able to find the lowest price. And that's why we have all the different vendors. We help give you as much information. And it's actually not always people looking for the lowest price. Sometimes they'll look for different trade-offs of having a vendor that takes care of them, or better customer service, or all these different types of things. So we really try to help people make an informed choice about first what flight or what hotel or what car they want to rent, and then secondly who they want to purchase that from.
Okay. When it comes to technology, do you have any R&D departments or any places where innovation comes from the inside?
Yeah, so the philosophical belief first. So I think if you ever create a department called your innovation department, it kind of removes the responsibility from everybody else. And building a technology company, you expect everybody to be innovating. You expect everybody to be trying to find a better way to solve a problem tomorrow than the way they were solving it today. And so I tend to not believe in creating these separate, isolated innovation groups, and rather think about how do you make sure that everybody in the team has the space and the freedom and the empowerment to go build a better mousetrap or to go solve a new problem.
And what's the answer? How do you do that?
Probably unsurprisingly, a big part of it's culture, but I think it does come back to leadership, and it comes back to, are you willing to give people space? Are you willing to let them experiment? One of the things with experiments is most of them fail. And so when you think about what are you setting up your organization to do when most experiments and most things you try are not going to work out for the better? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't create pressure and doesn't create blame, but still keeps focused on what you're trying to do? And also, you can't just experiment forever and fail forever, because at some point the company runs out of money.
Yeah.
And so there is a balance there. And I think that's the big part of leadership, is how do you balance that time investment so that you're encouraging the freedom, but you're still making progress towards your goal of serving your users and keeping the company afloat.
That's a great answer. I like that. Now let's go to the audience. There's a question here from Anonymous. And the question is, which I don't know why you would do that, but the question is, if you could just walk away from your job tomorrow, literally just say, screw this, I'm out of here, what would you do? Where would you go? Don't say Bali.
No. No, Bali is beautiful for those who don't think. I think if it was a short walk away, one of those islands with the huts over the water, like the Maldives or Bora Bora, sounds pretty amazing. But on my personal to-do list that I haven't had a chance to do yet is I'd love to get into kite surfing and really spend the time to figure out how to do all that cool stuff that you actually see people do who know how to do it.
Really?
Yeah, but I imagine that will take much longer than a couple days.
Okay, I'm going on Sunday if you want to join.
Awesome.
Yeah. So kite surfing, what was the last time you personally used Skyscanner as a customer?
Tuesday.
Oh, so you don't have other people do your flights, you do yourself?
Oh, no.
You just tested?
No, I absolutely book my own flights. I think,
that's awesome.
Again, that's a leadership. It doesn't matter if you work in travel or you work in accounting software. You need to be able to use your own product, especially if it's a consumer-facing product. You should understand what your users are doing. And virtually every time I use the product, I usually file a couple bugs and send feedback to the team and do all kinds of things. But for anybody who's here from there, they definitely know I do. But I think it's really, really important. Again, this is one of those leadership things, is that we're all on the same team. Some of us have different jobs. I wish my editor was still a code editor. Most of my primary editor is now like Outlook and Word. But we all just have a different role. And if you're not participating in the product, you're not using it, you're not giving feedback, you're not helping it better, I think you really lose credibility over time.
Great answer. Next question from Jack. And Jack wants to know if you're part of a brand new SaaS startup and you were tech team member number 1. How would you prioritize growing the tech team? Do you still remember how it is when the company is really small?
I do, yeah. So I think one of the fundamental things, especially on the technology side, is just like you have a company culture, you have a technology culture. And I would always talk about the first 5 hires being the most important for any product that you're going to go start. And those 5 hires are going to set the culture of your technology team. So are you getting people that build really fast but build things that don't actually work? Right? So they ship every day and everything falls over. Okay, if you hire 5 people that work exactly like that, that's actually going to be the culture. You're going to move really fast and deliver stuff. And there might be scenarios where that's appropriate, where first mover but not reliable is actually okay and you can fix reliability later. There are other people who will be that very careful, slow and steady, but it will always work, and then you can find things in the middle. The same when you look at how do you design, what are your design reviews? Do you design for getting from 0 to 1 billion users, or do you design getting to 2,000 users, and when you have 2,000 users, you'll figure out the next 10,000?
Sure.
Right? All of these kind of attributes all get founded by those first couple of folks that you hire.
Okay, next question is from Victor, and Victor wants to know, for a startup company in internet mobile apps, what do you think is the most important attributes to look for when selecting a co-founding CTO?
So I think if you're founding a company today, to ignore mobile and to ignore apps is clearly at your peril. I think one of the really interesting questions to me is I ask people to talk to me about consumer behavior and how does behavior change not just between desktop and mobile. That's almost so reported and routine to talk about. But ask people to talk about the difference between using a web browser app on your phone and using an actual app and an icon on your phone. And not just what does that mean technology-wise, but what does that actually mean for your consumer? What does that mean for your user? What is that relationship with your user? How is it different? What are the expectations around personalization and experience and remembering what you used last time and remembering where you left off? And when you get people that really understand those nuances and understand how the best consumer mobile apps in the world work, that's your co-founder.
Nice, very good answer. Bogdan wants to know if you had to start a company today, what would it be?
So a lot of my background is in data and big data and machine learning. And I still think there's this one problem that every kind of mid-sized to big-sized company has. And it sounds so easy. And there's lots of companies, by the way, pursuing this. So it's not like this is a new little idea. But the notion of, well, let's just put all of our data in one place so that it'll be easy to report on it. It sounds so simple and so obvious. And yet it's like this massively complex and difficult for all of these valid and true reasons. But it's an unbelievably hard problem to solve. So
Does the NSA do it in the US?
So I don't know how the NSA does this, but I'm going to guess that they use more use more than one engineer to do this. Right? It's every company. Adrian Cockcroft, who was the guy who kind of brought cloud to Netflix and was their chief architect and stuff, used to make a joke about Netflix is that what Netflix actually built was a data and monitoring service that happens to stream video. And the complexity of their system is about half of it is just data and monitoring. And it's even no matter what company you build, your data system is always the biggest scale thing you have because it gets information from every other service you build. And so I wish somebody would just solve that problem so you can just check a box, hit submit, hit go, and it just works.
This is great. I could go on and on. Before we finish, let's take 3 questions from the audience in person, so you can raise your hand if you have any questions. And we're going to pass you on the microphone. Let's do one over there here. And please, quick question, quick answer. Okay? Just stand up and say your name.
Yeah. So my name's John. I'm actually at the top of the list as well.
There you go.
So,
You can from all corners.
yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for the talk. Really appreciate it. Really, it's on that. So with investment tolerance being so vastly different between the UK and the USA, do you actually believe that innovation is at a disadvantage in the UK for that reason? And are you seeing change, considering you've worked sort of in Europe and around the world?
So first, let me characterize at least my opinion of how I perceive some of the different investment tolerance. And I think I think not just in the UK, but Europe and Asia, and most of the world kind of outside of the US, I think many of the kind of venture investments and VC investments require companies to be somewhat operationally disciplined from an early age, right? And they'll put capital in, but they expect to see growth, they expect to see some discipline. These models like, like some of the like Uber and Lyft and some of these companies who have models of, oh, hey, I'm being conservative because I'm only burning 50 million a month kind of models, right? Like, I just don't think there's a lot of tolerance for that across Europe or Asia. But I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think it requires companies early on to have an idea and have a premise of something that's actually going to work and be disciplined about how they pursue that. So I don't know that hampers innovation, but what it does is it focuses it to make sure that you build something viable out of it. Versus you have, to kind of oversimplify some of the US investing philosophy, not all of them, but a number of the VCs are kind of go big or go home. So I'll happily spend money and hopefully this is worth $1 billion later. And if I get $1 billion hit, I can get a lot of misses. Clearly, investment companies across Europe, across the Middle East, across Asia, across the US have all grown and been successful. So there's clearly ways to make it work either way. I think there's also a reverse piece, which is depending on the type of company you're building, you want to be really thoughtful about the VCs that you partner with, because you want to have somebody who's really philosophically aligned with the type of company you're building.
Thanks for the question, John. Next question is, okay, please stand up.
Hi, I'm Oscar. I'm also a CTO, but I haven't looked at Skype or Microsoft or any of those things. I'm available for hire. Very serious question. Perhaps in the early days, when you're going to ask business people some serious searching questions about their market and their focus, and did you ever get any resistance to that and pushback that, hang on a second, you're technical, you do technical stuff, let's worry about business, but obviously you need to know business context in order to have the best solution, the best roadmap, the best hiring plan, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, all the time, I think over careers, there's always this perception that the technical guys are the guys who just sit in the corner and they just do as they're told. I think whenever you walk into a leadership position, your responsibilities as a business leader first, who happens to run a function. And whether your function is finance or legal or software engineering, that's almost your secondary job to being a leader for the business. And so if you have, you should certainly qualify this before you join an organization, but if you find yourself in this type of situation, I think it's very much about having that conversation with your peers and establishing that we're all here for the same purpose. We're all bought into helping the company be successful. The way we're going to be successful is by looking at all of us to understand what are the constraints, what are the opportunities, how do we be successful, and then we each go take our parts of that solution and go off and drive execution. And I think it's a question on protocol more than the specific situation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next one.
Acknowledging the fact that Skyscanner did not exist, planes would still fly. So, are you a carbon neutral company? Do you guys, you're laughing at that, so you probably get a good answer.
So I think planes would still fly. But it's one of the things that we've looked at as we've scaled and as we've grown. It's what else can we do? What else can we help travelers who really worry about this and care about this area? How can we help them better balance their personal carbon footprint? And so a number of airlines actually now offer this as the way that you check out. And there's some other super interesting stuff that we're looking at that I probably can't talk about in detail, but some really interesting research things that we can do to even maybe take that further. So it is something that we keep in mind about how do we enable travelers to really get that offset appropriate and do so in a very transparent and open way.
Nice. Please stand up and ask away.
Hi, you've spoken a lot about culture in this talk. How do you see the role of diversity in age, gender, cultural background, etc. playing in this?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. One is part of that culture is having a culture that is very open to and inclusive of those with different opinions, different backgrounds, different upbringings, different points of view, all of those perspectives, and whether that's across sort of the more commonly reported around gender and ethnicity and geography, But even to the previous question on the CTO, it's just the engineer opinion versus the business person opinion is also a level of diversity. And I think part of it is the culture that you build of how inclusive are you of different points of view and different perspectives, and do you have a culture that's welcoming to that? I think the how do you build a truly diverse company is a whole deep, probably 1 hour talk by itself, so I won't go to that, but I do think there's a balance between the two. It's not one or the other.
Okay, and one more from the audience.
Hi, I want to ask a question about, so people get hired these days, and everyone wants, leaders, and everyone wants databases, and everyone wants alpha personalities. So when you have a smaller company, that works, and you have change and you have improvement. But what happens when you get more and more people, and maybe they don't work as well together because all of them are leaders, and all of them are driving change, and nowadays the technologies, there's so many to choose from. Some people like that way of doing things, and some people like the other way of doing things. And then when the company grows bigger, you have more maintenance work as well to do, which is less interesting to what people want, to change and greenfield projects, and maybe not interested in maintenance. How do you employ people? How do you build teams that you do have those alpha personalities and you do have those, flag carriers, but at the same time, people who work together and can work long term on those things that may be less interested in fun, but it's a lot.
Really good question.
So what's your magic formula?
Yeah. So there's one word I probably didn't stress enough tonight, but it's the word ownership. And I think one of the most critical things when you screen for people is that sense of ownership. Because just like you said, if you look at something like legacy code. Legacy code and maintaining something is not necessarily as exciting as building the next cool new thing. But that sense of ownership is saying, I'm delivering this particular value to my customer. And regardless of whether I'm using the old tech or the new tech, or I'm in the process of getting from one to the other, I'm going to be responsible and accountable for making sure that end-to-end scenario, that sentiment of ownership, that is one of those really critical things that you want to screen for, because that is what prevents people from just abandoning the old thing that actually all of your users are still currently using, because it's a sense of that you have that sense of obligation, that sense of duty. I think the other piece, just you mentioned alpha and leadership. I think there's an important difference between being a leader and telling everybody what to do. And so sometimes I see these things get conflated where lots of people argue because everybody wants to tell everybody else what to do. And one of the things that you look at having a lot of strong opinions in the room, strong opinions are fantastic, but you've got to balance them with being loosely held. And so if you and I both have a strong opinion on a topic and you have data that says, oh, actually it should be blue, not red, I should be very willing to accept that data and move on to that point. And there's lots of behaviors around this, but when you look at having a team that functions well together, is that we're all focused on the same goal. We will have strong opinions, but ultimately we will get to an agreement, and then we'll all get behind whatever is the right agreement that we decide as a team, and then move forward. It's a delicate balance to strike.
On the note of moving forward, I would like to ask the last thing to finish. There was this funny story where Charlie Rose, who is an interviewer in the US, he has a show called 60 Minutes. It was during the product announcement of Apple, and Steve Jobs was on stage, and Charlie Rose was backstage waiting for Steve Jobs to finish, and they were supposed to be having an interview. And he asked Tim Cook, hey Tim, what should I ask him? Tell me something interesting, some crazy question I should ask Steve Jobs. And Tim suggested, why don't you ask him what comes after the internet? And I just find this question fascinating. And fast forward 5 years, Charlie Rose was doing an interview with Tim Cook as a new CEO of Apple. And guess what his last question was? Now, what I'd like to know, because you are a big expert of big data, and we have all these technologies merging together and growing exponentially, and we know this singularity is coming, and are you also as nervous about artificial intelligence, and especially as Elon Musk is, or is it technology?
So I'm going to answer the first, because that's about how I feel. I don't know how to answer what happens in 2050. But I think from a fear perspective, I think I'm actually really positively encouraged by how much public and open debate is happening now before we have this sort of ubiquitous general purpose self-learning AI in place and everywhere. And so I think having that open debate and people having frequent discussions around what are the right regulations, what are the right ethics, what are the do's and don't do's, and how do we balance this, I think is actually quite encouraging that you have such an engaged conversation with some of the brightest minds in the industry. So that gives me an optimistic hope for the future that we'll look at AI as an enablement and a helper for humans as opposed to a threat or competitor.
And on this note, please join me in thanking Bryan Dove from Skyscanner. Before we finish, a few more notes. Thank you for coming. We do this every single month. The next speaker next month is going to be a gentleman who started a company called Trello. He sold the company for almost $500 million to Atlassian. Then he started another company called Stack Overflow.